So in this class, this semester, I'm making 3 big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is that the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change the global order. So last class, we looked at one reason why the United States would invade Iran, which is the Israel lobby. And in today's class, we'll look at another reason, which is the defense of empire. America is an empire, and it must defend its imperial status. So let's examine what an empire means for America. So from 1950 to 1980, America's economy was mainly focused on manufacturing, factories, okay? So manufacturing as a share of GDP was 40%. It made 40% of profits, okay? And it employed 30% of the workforce. So during World War II, America had a lot of factories to produce weapons. And after World War II, these factories produced consumer goods, cars, electronics, to sell to the world. And this made the American workers the wealthiest and most well-educated middle class ever in human history. If you were a factory worker from 1950 to 1980, you had a really good life. You worked 40 hours a week. You had health insurance. You could buy your own house. Your wife didn't have to work. You could have 3 to 4 kids. You could have 2 cars. Every year, you could go on vacation to some place nice. You could eat out once a week. And then you retired and had a very good pension. So it was really the best life. And so workers from 1950 to 1980 in America were really the luckiest people on the planet. You were better off actually being born into the middle class in America than you were being born rich in Africa or Asia or South America, okay? But then after 1980, was something called the Reagan Revolution and the introduction of what we call neoliberalism. And remember that we studied neoliberalism before. Neoliberalism is an economic philosophy that believes in the primacy of free markets and deregulation. So after that, we now live in today what we call a financial economy. Okay? The economy has been financialized. And so what does that mean? It means that right now, financial services okay, account for 22% of all GDP in America. Manufacturing has gone down to 10%. So it went down from a high of 40% to now a low of 10%. Financial services is now twice as much as manufacturing. Financial services bring in 40% of all profits. And financial services employs 5% of the total American workforce. Okay? Now, let me explain what these numbers mean. What you're seeing behind these numbers is a radical shift, overhaul, transition in American society. Okay? Let's just look at politics. Politics, governance. From this period, 1950, 1980, American workers had a lot of political power, right? Because they were middle class, they were confident, they participated in politics for unions, okay? Today, most of this power has shifted to the financial services, which basically means Wall Street. And working for Wall Street are what we called the professional managerial elite. Okay, so these are people who live on the coast, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C., Boston. They went to elite schools, okay, the Ivy League, and they're multicultural, and right now they're the most powerful political group in America. And this has led to massive political divisions within the country, okay? So it's the first major consequence. Before, it was workers who had a large say over American politics. And now it is Wall Street, the financial sector, and the coastal professional management elite. And so government shapes policies that favors this multicultural elite, financial elite, over at the expense of workers, okay? So that's the first major shift. But then you look at education. And so what I mean by that is that, you know, if you went to a good school, a good university in the 1950s and 1960s, your ambition was to become a professor, right? Or maybe a scientist, or maybe an entrepreneur, or a corporate executive, okay? Nowadays, most people who graduate from these top schools all want to go where? Wall Street, and that's it, okay? Why? Because you make more money on Wall Street than anywhere else. Okay? So you're talking about these PhDs in statistics and artificial intelligence who should be working for IBM, developing the latest technology, right? Instead, they're on Wall Street working for a hedge fund, gambling with other people's money. Okay, so basically the economy has gone from one that is productive or creative to one that is entirely speculative. Okay? So remember that the financial services, all it does is take people's money and gamble with it or invest in it to make more money. Okay? It's not actually productive. It's all it is speculative. Okay? And the smartest people in America, the most well-educated, are all focused on this sector. Okay? And then you look at the economy. And what has clearly changed is that the economy in America has become much more unstable. So in 2001, there was the internet crash, right? The dot-com crash. And in 2008, there was the financial crisis, right? The subprime crash. And then after that, you have all the you have these banks going bankrupt, okay? I think like this past week, 3 banks went bankrupt in America. This should not be happening. And the reason why this is happening are all these bubbles, okay? So in other words, all assets right now in America are overpriced, okay? Housing, stock market, and people are gambling that these asset prices will only go higher, which creates bubbles. And when these bubbles burst, you have volatility and instability and uncertainty, okay? So this is bad for the economy. And then you have things like inequality, right? So if you look at profits, if you look at wealth generation, the top 1% make much more money than everyone else. And this inequality is only increasing. Okay? So in other words, the financialization of the American economy has been really bad for America. And you can make the argument that it's actually destroying the fabric of American society. Okay? It's making politics much more divisive. It's making the economy much more volatile. The smartest people are engaged in speculative activities. Young people don't want to work. They just want to buy Bitcoin. And you can also make the argument that you're creating a rentier economy. Okay? And the rentier economy just means that if you are young, you can never afford to buy a house. You can only rent. which means that you yourself can never go from, you have no more social mobility, okay? So this overall is really bad for America. Now the question then is, how did America get to this point? How did it transition from a manufacturing economy to a financial economy? And there are different theories out there, okay? There are some economists who say that this is just late-stage capitalism, okay? This is the natural evolution of capitalism. There are some who argue that it is the neoliberalism or the Reagan Revolution that caused this. Okay, when you cut back the role of government, when you emphasize free markets, then you have this situation, the over-financialization of the economy, okay? What I want to show you today is that the real reason is the transition to empire, okay? There's a really simple explanation for why this is happening, and the reason is that after the end of the Cold War, 1991, America became a global empire. It could now set the rules of the game, and it set the rules of the game so that it would always win. And then all money flowed to America, which created all these asset bubbles. Okay? So that's the argument I'm making to you today, okay? So are we clear about what's happening? Any questions so far? Okay, now I want to explain to you how America became an empire. In fact, the most powerful empire in human history, because even though Rome was powerful, it didn't really control the world. Whereas America, the American empire today, controls the entire world, okay? And so to understand how America became an empire, you have to go back to the founding of America. Okay, so in 1776, America declared independence from Britain. And at that time, they had something called the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence, if you read the document, it's very clear. It's what the founding fathers of America said is that we are founding a new society in America based on God. Okay? Now, the founding fathers were Christians, but they were a special type of Christians who believed in the idea of deism. And deism is the idea that, yes, there is a God, and God did create everything, but God is not interested in managing human affairs. God leaves us alone, which means that we as humans are empowered to create the world we want to create. Okay? And the founding fathers wanted to create a new society based on the idea of God, okay? And what they believed is that God gave human beings 3 fundamental rights that all governments must respect, okay? And so the famous phrase is, do you guys know the famous phrase? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? That is the mission, the purpose of America, to ensure that every American would have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's really the goal, the role of government. Life, to make you safe, okay? To provide security against enemies. Liberty, the right to say whatever you believe, the right to believe whatever you believe, okay? So the tolerance of all creeds, religions. Now last is the pursuit of happiness. What does pursuit of happiness mean? You guys know? So Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and when he wrote the pursuit of happiness, he had a very specific idea in mind. What does the pursuit of happiness mean? Which is what? Okay, so wealth, okay? So in America, your fundamental right, the fundamental purpose of your life is to make as much money as you can, to amass as much wealth as you can. Okay? And the idea here is that in this society, in this new society, this new experiment called America, if we allow everyone to pursue the creation of wealth, then America will become powerful. Okay? That's the idea. And it turned out that this idea was absolutely correct. Okay? In a very short amount of time, America industrialized very rapidly, and at the end of World War II, America became the most powerful country in the world. Okay? After World War II, it decided that it can now export its philosophy to the rest of the world. So in 1944, there's something called the Bretton Woods Conference. Okay? And so in 1944, everyone knew that Nazi Germany would be defeated, okay, and Japan would be defeated, which would make America the most powerful, the richest nation on the planet, okay? Now, the Soviet Union was a competitor, but they didn't really matter, okay? They had their own sphere of influence. So America got together with its allies in Europe, and they decided what the new global financial system would look like. And the idea was that with Bretton Woods, they decided that the US dollar would become the global reserve currency, which basically meant that you could buy anything with the US dollar. Now, there are some people at Bretton Woods, some economists, who were afraid that this would cause problems, right? If you have a government which was in control of the global reserve currency, that would basically make the government God, right? If they could just print as much money as they wanted, they could become like Midas. If they touch something, it would become gold, okay? So some people thought it was dangerous. And so the compromise is that the US dollar had to be backed by gold, okay, the gold standard. In other words, the US dollar was basically like a receipt for gold. If you had $1 million, okay, you could go to any American bank and get $1 million worth of gold for it. Okay, does that make sense? So that's what we call the gold standard. And for the longest, and so that led, this Bretton Woods system led to tremendous prosperity in America and in Europe and in Japan, okay? Then, in 1971, Richard Nixon did something really radical. He basically said, we America, we're gonna go off the gold standard, okay? Remember that America had spent too much money on the space race, on Vietnam,